I went to the Hall of Reckoning before dawn. I had done this every morning for 11 years, since the day I took the crown, and before that, my father had done it, and his mother before him. None of us ever said why. There was no custom that required it. We went because the seal was there, and because not checking on it felt like turning our backs on a wound. The seal was set into the center of the floor, 3 feet across, forged of black iron, covered in markings that no scholar in 6 generations had been able to fully translate. We knew what it did. We did not know, precisely, what it said. The sorcerer who said it had been thorough in his contempt. The curse was simple in effect. Each generation of the Veyrath line would be slightly less than the one before. Our wolves, smaller. Our healers' hands, colder. Our pups, born into a world that pulled a little harder against them. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you could point to in a single year. You had to lay the records of 6 generations side by side to see the slow diminishment, like watching a tide go out by the inch. One more generation, the eldest scholars said, and it would be complete. I stood in the gray pre-dawn light and looked at the seal the way I always did, with the particular patience of a man who has accepted that he cannot solve a thing and has not yet found a way to stop trying. The iron was cold, inert. It did not care that I was there. Lord Kale's envoy arrived with the morning. I heard him before I saw him, the brisk footstep of a man who has already decided what he is going to say before he walks into the room. He had the testing proposal in his hand, a list of noble candidates, women of standing from 3 allied holds, prepared to attempt the seal. The envoy was young and earnest, and not unkind. He explained that Lord Kale believed the time had come, that the kingdom could not afford to wait, that every generation narrowed the window. I knew all of this. I had known it since I was 12. I will not put women through that ceremony again, I said. You have seen the record. 43 attempts in 6 generations, 43 failures, in public, before the assembled court. I will not do it. The envoy was ready for this. He had a counter-argument prepared, calm and reasonable. The candidates had come willingly. The fate of the pack required it. The curse would complete within a generation if nothing was done. Every point was true. I looked at the list. 12 names. Women I knew, or knew of, daughters of lords, healers of standing, a scholar from the Eastern Academy who had studied the seal's markings for 4 years. All of them willing. All of them, I already knew, wrong. My wolf had gone still and sorry at the sight of each name, the same way it had gone still and sorry at 43 names before them. I was still holding the list when I heard her footsteps. Sable crossed the Hall of Reckoning every morning. She was a pack runner, the one who carried messages between the hold and its outer villages, 12 miles in the dark and 12 miles back, every day the roads allowed. She had come to the hold 3 years ago from a flooded southern village, asking for work, and I had sent her to the runner's yard without giving it much thought. She was quick and careful, and she had a way of reading the weather in the far hills that saved her from bad roads. The hold relied on her. Nobody thought about her much beyond that. I had thought about her somewhat more than that. Not in any way I had named. A king does not name things he does not intend to act on, and I had not let myself intend anything for 11 years. But I knew the sound of her footsteps. I knew which lamp she lit when she came in early, and which she skipped when she was running late. I knew she brought back marsh herbs from the southern route and left them in the healer's stores without telling anyone. These were things I had noticed without deciding to notice, the way you notice weather. She came through the south door with a satchel over one shoulder, her breath still white from the morning air. She was cutting through the hall on her way to the runner's yard, the shortest route, the one she always took. She was not looking at the seal. She never looked at the seal. She looked at the floor the way people do when they're thinking about something else entirely. Then she walked within 4 feet of the iron, and the seal pulsed. It was subtle, a single beat of warmth through the stone floor, like a coal shifting beneath ash. The envoy did not feel it. I felt it through the soles of my boots, and my wolf, which had been still and sorry a moment ago, went very quiet in a different way, the way it went quiet when something important was about to be decided. Sable stopped. She had felt something too. I could see it in the way she stood, her weight shifting forward slightly, her head tilting the way it did when she was sorting out a road condition by feel. She looked down at the floor, then at the seal, for the first time, with the expression of someone who has just noticed something that has apparently been noticing them. I said her name. She looked up. The envoy had gone silent. The two guards at the door had gone still. I was aware of all of this distantly, the way you are aware of the edges of a room when something in the center of it has your whole attention. "Would you come here?" I said. Not a command. I was careful about that. "I want to ask you something." She crossed the distance between us without hurrying and stood at the edge of the seal. Up close, I could see that the iron was no longer entirely cold. The markings at the outer rim had taken on the faint look of something warmed from below. Not glowing, not dramatic, just the difference between iron in winter and iron in a room where someone has been living. "I've never asked anyone this without a ceremony around it," I said, "and I find I don't want one now. Would you put your hands on the seal for me?" She looked at me directly, and then at the iron, and then back at me. "I don't know anything about this," she said. "I know. I'm a runner. I know that too." She considered this for a moment, with the same practical attention she gave a questionable road. Then she crouched and placed both palms flat on the iron. What happened next took no time at all, and also took all the time there was. The seal did not crack. It did not shatter or flare or announce itself with any of the drama I had half expected from 43 failures and a lifetime of dread. It simply opened. The warmth that had been building for 3 years in the stone beneath the hall rose all at once through the iron, through her hands, and out. The markings lit briefly, every one of them, in the same pale gold as a candle, seen through a closed hand. Then they went dark. The sound was the hold exhaling, not a metaphor. I heard it, through the walls, through the floor, through the stone of 6 generations of held breath. Somewhere in the courtyard, wolves began to call. Not in alarm, in something that sounded very much like relief. My wolf, inside me, made a sound I had never heard it make, low and whole and certain, like a long argument finally resolved. The mate mark came up on my wrist, pale gold, the Veyrath line's mark, a thing that had not appeared on any of my forebears in 6 generations of the curse, because the curse had not permitted it. I looked at Sable's left wrist, the same mark, the same gold, rising through her skin like lamplight from beneath. She was looking at it with her head tilted. "That's new," she said. I almost laughed. I did not, quite, because the envoy and the guards were there, and I was still a king, and kings do not almost laugh in front of witnesses. But I felt it. The loosening of something I had not known was clenched. I reached down and took her hands. She let me. She looked up at me with the same direct attention she'd given the uncertain road, and I found that I had been waiting for someone to look at me like that, without ceremony, without performance, without the careful management of a king's feelings, for a very long time. "I should have noticed," I said. "I meant the warmth in the floor, the seal's 3-year restlessness, the fact that it shifted every morning at the same hour, which was the hour she crossed the hall. You were looking at the wrong part of the floor," she said. She was not wrong. The envoy cleared his throat. I had, briefly, forgotten he was there. I straightened, and did not release her hands, and looked at him. "The binding is released," I said. It was not necessary to say. He had eyes. "This is Sable of the Runner's Yard, and she is my fated mate, and she is to be addressed accordingly from this morning forward. Is that recorded?" He was writing already, with the focused attention of a man who senses that history is happening and does not want to be the one who failed to note it properly. "Recorded, my lord." "Good." I turned to the guards at the door and told them to send word to the hold. Then I turned back to Sable. The mark on her wrist had settled, warm and steady, no longer rising. She was looking at it with an expression I could not entirely read. Not frightened, not overwhelmed, something quieter than either. "You can say no," I said. "The mark doesn't bind you to anything you don't choose. I want that to be plain." She looked up. "The mark has been there for 3 years," she said. "Hasn't it?" She meant the seal warming, the floor's pulse, the way she had taken the hall route every morning without quite deciding to. "I think so," I said. "Then I've already said yes," she said. "More mornings than I can count. I just didn't know what I was saying it to." She gave me her hand properly, turned it, and held it out, palm up, the runner's formal gesture of a message willingly carried. and I took it, and the mate mark warmed on both our wrists, and the Hall of Reckoning was quiet for the first time in 6 generations. Word reached the rest of the hold quickly. They came in ones and twos and then in a crowd that filled the south corridor and spilled into the courtyard. Pack members who had felt something shift in the air. Healers who found their hands suddenly warm in a way they had no name for. Wolf handlers whose animals were pressing against the yard fences and calling. The whole hold had felt the curse lift. They found their king standing in the center of the hall with a pack runner at his side, both of them marked with the same gold. The court went still in the way that courts do when something has happened that no ceremony was prepared for, not silent with shock, but quiet with the particular attention of people watching something that will be told in stories. I named her before all of them, plainly, without the performance of it. There was nothing to perform. The seal in the floor was cold iron now, just iron, ordinary, cleared of its charge. The only remarkable things in the room were the marks on our wrists and the warmth that had not left the air since the breaking. Sable stood beside me and received the court's acknowledgement with the composure of a woman who has navigated uncertain roads her whole life and knows how to hold her footing in new terrain. She did not pretend to be more comfortable than she was. She did not pretend to be less. She held my hand and stood straight, and when the eldest of the hold scholars came forward, with tears on her face and gripped Sable's marked wrist, Sable put her other hand over the old woman's and said something quiet that made her laugh. Lord Kale's envoy left that afternoon with a revised message. I did not ask what he would report. It was no longer my concern what Lord Kale had expected. That evening, when the hold had settled, I walked through the Hall of Reckoning alone, or not quite alone. Sable was beside me, which I was finding was the natural condition of things now, without either of us having announced it. She was looking at the seal the way she had looked at it that morning, with the practical attention of someone who has figured out a puzzle and is checking her work. What did it feel like? She asked. All those years. I thought about how to say it. Like running a very long way, I said, and not being allowed to stop. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I know something about that. It was a runner's joke. She said it with the small, dry warmth of someone who has just realized she is allowed to make jokes to a king now and is testing the boundary carefully. I did laugh then, properly, without managing it. It had been a long time since I had done that. She looked at me with something open and warm in her face, and the mark on her wrist caught the lamplight, and the iron in the floor was cold and quiet and ordinary beneath our feet. I had carried 6 generations of that weight. I had walked to this room every morning for 11 years, and looked at the thing I could not fix, and turned away to face another day. I would not be doing that anymore. She slipped her hand into mine, easily, the way she did everything, without ceremony, without making it into more than it was, and without making it into less. We stood there a moment longer, looking at the dark iron. Then we turned and walked out together, and the Hall of Reckoning was just a room,